The listing went up on a Tuesday in August. For sale. 480 acres. Burleigh County, North Dakota. Mixed grass prairie with seasonal creek. Fenced. No structures in habitable condition. House requires extensive renovation. Barn standing but not functional. No livestock included. Estate sale. Priced to move. That last phrase, priced to move, is what real estate agents write when they mean nobody in their right mind would pay market value for this property, and everyone involved just wants it over with. The Kessler family had been on that ground for 2 generations. Art Kessler bought it in 1978 when prairie land in Burleigh County was cheap and the cattle business was simple enough that a man with 60 cows and a strong back could make a living. Art ran the place for 30 years, built it up to 120 cows, paid off the mortgage, raised 2 sons, died in 2009 with his boots on and his books balanced. His son Craig took over. Craig was 41 when Art died and had been working the ranch alongside his father since high school. He knew the land, knew the cattle, knew the work. What he didn't know was that the economics of ranching had changed underneath him while he wasn't looking. Feed costs doubled between 2009 and 2014. Hay that Art used to put up for $12 a ton was now $40. Fuel for the tractors and trucks went from manageable to suffocating. Property taxes climbed. The price of calves at the sale barn didn't climb with them. Craig started borrowing, then borrowing more, then borrowing against the equity Art had spent 30 years building. By 2019, Craig owed more than the ranch was worth. His wife Diane had taken a job in Bismarck to cover the household bills. His 2 teenage kids were embarrassed to tell friends at school that their father was a rancher, which is something that happens when a profession stops being romantic and starts being a word for broke. Craig sold the cattle in March of 2020. All of them. 108 cows, the calves, the replacement heifers, everything went through the Bismarck livestock auction over 2 Saturdays. The checks covered about 60% of what he owed. The morning after the last sale, Craig woke up at 5:15 the way he always did. Feet on the cold floor, coffee on, boots by the door. He was halfway to the barn before his body caught up with his brain and reminded him, there's nothing to feed. The hay ring was empty. The water troughs were drained. The pastures that had held 108 cows the week before held nothing except fence posts and grass that didn't know it had been relieved of duty. He stood in the barn for 20 minutes. The smell was still there. Hay dust, manure, the mineral tang of cattle supplement that had soaked into the wood over 40 years. His father's smell. The smell of a life that had worked for 1 generation and broken the next. Diane found him sitting on an overturned bucket in the calving pen. She didn't say anything, just stood in the doorway with 2 cups of coffee and waited until he was ready to come inside. Everything except the bull. The bull was a 4-year-old Angus Simmental cross that Craig had bought 2 years earlier from a dispersal sale in Mandan. He'd paid $2,100 for him because the bull's breeding soundness exam had come back marginal. Scrotal circumference at the low end of acceptable, motility slightly below average. No other buyer wanted him. Craig needed a bull and couldn't afford better. The bull worked fine, bred the cows, produced adequate calves, nothing special. The kind of animal that does the job without making anyone write about him in a catalog or brag about him at the sale barn. When Craig dispersed the herd, he listed the bull in the catalog. Reserve price, $800. Below meat value for an animal his size. Nobody bid. Not one hand went up. An Angus Simmental cross with a marginal BSE and no reputation, listed by an operation that was clearly failing. The market read the situation and walked away. Craig pulled the bull from the sale, took him home, put him back in the pasture, and 2 weeks later, on an April morning that was too beautiful for what was happening, Craig and Diane loaded the last of their personal belongings into a U-Haul. The kids sat in the back seat of Diane's car and didn't look up from their phones. They'd already said goodbye to the house in their own way, by refusing to acknowledge they were leaving it. Craig walked the property one last time. Barn. Equipment shed. The calving pen where he'd pulled his first calf at 17 with his father standing behind him saying, "Slow boy, let the cow do the work." The fence line his father had strung in the 80s that was still tight after 4 decades because Art Kessler set his post deep and didn't cut corners on wire. The bull was in the south pasture, standing near the creek. He watched Craig the way cattle watch when they know something is different but can't identify what. His ears forward, his body still. An animal reading a situation that had no precedent in his experience. The human who feeds him is walking the property with a pace that doesn't match any routine. Craig stopped at the fence, looked at the bull for a long time. "I'm sorry," he said. Not loud enough for anyone to hear except maybe the bull, who heard it and didn't understand it and stood there anyway. Then Craig got in the U-Haul. Diane followed in her car. The kids didn't look back. Craig looked back once, in the side mirror, and saw 480 acres getting smaller and a dark shape in the south pasture getting smaller with it. Craig told himself he'd come back for the bull. Find a buyer, arrange transport, do the responsible thing. But the apartment lease needed a deposit. The kids needed school supplies. Diane needed to know the checking account wasn't empty for the third month in a row. The bull became the thing Craig would deal with next week, then next month, then eventually became 4 months. Nobody knows exactly what those 4 months looked like from the bull's perspective, but the land tells part of the story. Spring. The grass came up in May the way it does on the northern plains. Slow at first, then all at once, the prairie turning from brown to green in a week like someone had flipped a switch underground. The bull grazed. Without fences dividing the property into pastures, he went wherever the grass called him. South to the creek bottom where the moisture kept things green longest. North to the hilltop where the wind kept the flies down. East along the fence line where the native forbs grew thickest because no tractor had ever sprayed them. Summer. The heat came. Not Mississippi heat. North Dakota heat is different, dry and bright, the kind that burns your neck but lets you breathe. The bull found shade in the draw where a stand of cottonwoods lined the seasonal creek. He'd graze morning and evening when it was cool and rest midday where the shade was deepest. The pattern of every grazing animal that has ever lived on open ground since grass was invented. 4 months of an animal doing what animals have done on grasslands for 10,000 years without anyone telling them how. Eating, walking, resting, moving on before the grass gave too much, letting the patch recover before coming back. Not because he had a plan, because he had legs and instinct and 480 acres of room to use both. The listing agent, a woman named Val Ottinger out of Bismarck, drove to the property in August to take photographs for the real estate listing. She was expecting an empty farm, abandoned buildings, dry summer pasture, the standard aesthetic of a failed agricultural operation in central North Dakota. She was not expecting a bull. Val saw him from the county road, a large, dark shape moving across the south pasture. At first she thought it was a stray, maybe a neighbor's animal that had pushed through a fence. Then she drove closer and realized the animal was on the right side of the fence, inside the property. And he was enormous. She called Craig. "There's a bull on the property." Silence. Then, "Yeah, he's mine. I couldn't sell him. He's been there since we left. Since you left. That was 4 months ago. I know. Has anyone been feeding him?" "No." Val looked at the bull through her windshield. He was standing in the open pasture maybe 200 yards from the road. He looked fine. Not thin. Not distressed. He looked like a bull standing in a pasture where he belonged. In August. In North Dakota. After 4 months alone with no supplemental feed, no minerals, no human contact. Craig. How is he alive? I don't know. Val took her listing photographs and drove back to Bismarck. She mentioned the bull to her husband that evening. Her husband mentioned it to his co-worker. His co-worker mentioned it to his brother-in-law, who happened to be Dr. Thomas Volk, a range ecologist at North Dakota State University. Tom called Val the next day. She told him the story. He asked to see the property. What Tom found when he drove out to the Kessler place on a Saturday morning in September would end up in a presentation at the Society for Range Management conference in Boise the following spring. The bull was still there, standing in the south pasture. He moved away when Tom approached the fence but didn't flee. Cautious, not panicked. An animal that had been alone long enough to be wary of humans. but not long enough to become truly feral. Tom wasn't interested in the bull. He was interested in the grass. He walked the property for 3 hours. He drove soil probes into the ground at 12 different points across the 480 acres. He photographed the plant community. He measured standing grass height, the amount of growth present at end of the grazing season. Then he drove to the adjacent property to the east, a functioning cattle operation run by a family named Dietz, and took the same measurements. The comparison made him pull out his phone and call his department head. The Kessler property, abandoned for 4 months with a single bull grazing freely, had standing grass height averaging 8 inches at the end of summer. The Dietz property, actively managed with 100 cows on a 3-pasture rotation, had standing grass height averaging 3 inches. The Kessler soil probes showed organic matter levels 12% higher than the Dietz samples taken 50 yards away on the other side of the fence. The Kessler pasture showed 17 native grass species. The Dietz pasture showed 11. 1 bull. No management. No rotation schedule. No grazing plan. No fencing. No human decision-making of any kind for months. And the land was in measurably better condition than the managed ranch next door. Tom knew why. The science wasn't new. It was just rarely demonstrated this cleanly. A single bull on 480 acres is what range ecologists call ultra-low stocking density. The animal grazes a small area, then moves on. Not because a rancher moves him, because he's a grazing animal, and grazing animals don't stand in one spot eating grass to the dirt the way they do when they're fenced into small pastures by humans trying to maximize utilization. The bull grazed a patch, moved on. The patch rested, recovered, grew back stronger because the grazing had stimulated root growth. A documented response in perennial grasses where moderate defoliation triggers the plant to push roots deeper and produce more tillers. Over 4 months, the bull had unknowingly performed a perfect demonstration of what grazing scientists call rest rotation. The principle that grass needs time between grazing events to recover, and that the ideal grazing pattern is brief, intense impact, followed by long rest. The Dietz operation next door was doing what most ranches in the northern plains do: continuous grazing with moderate stocking rates. The cattle stayed in each pasture for months at a time, repeatedly grazing the same plants before they could recover. The grass got shorter, the roots got shallower, the soil lost organic matter. Standard degradation pattern that happens on 80% of managed rangeland in the western United States. The bull didn't know any of this. He was just eating grass and walking. But his walking was the rest period that the grass needed, and his eating was the stimulation that the roots needed. And the combination, 4 months of an animal doing what animals have done on grasslands for 10,000 years without anyone telling them how, had produced a result that made a range ecologist call his department head on a Saturday morning. Tom's presentation at the Society for Range Management included the Kessler data alongside 4 other case studies of ungrazed and lightly grazed prairie recovery. But the Kessler case got the most attention because of the narrative: a failing ranch, an abandoned bull, and land that healed itself when the humans left and the animals stayed. The question this raises, Tom told the audience, is uncomfortable but necessary. How much of our rangeland degradation is caused by livestock, and how much is caused by the way we manage livestock? This bull didn't have a grazing plan. He had instinct, and his instinct produced better ecological outcomes than most management plans I've evaluated in 20 years. The room was quiet for a moment. Then a rancher in the back row raised his hand. So you're saying we should all go bankrupt and leave 1 bull on the property? No. I'm saying we should study what that bull did naturally and figure out how to replicate it with a full herd. The answer isn't fewer cattle. It's different management. Move them more. Rest the land longer. Let the grass recover between grazings. The bull didn't do anything we don't already know how to do. He just did it without overthinking it. Craig Kessler saw the presentation online 6 months later. Someone forwarded him the link. A cousin he hadn't talked to since the sale. The subject line said, "Isn't this your place?" Craig watched it at 11:30 at night in the apartment in Bismarck. Diane was asleep. The kids were in their rooms. The apartment was 900 square feet and smelled like other people's cooking from the unit next door. He watched on his phone with the volume low because the walls were thin and the neighbors complained about noise after 10. The property he'd failed on. The bull nobody wanted. The land he couldn't make money from. And a scientist standing in front of 300 people at a conference in Boise, Idaho, explaining that the abandoned Kessler ranch was in better ecological condition than the working operations around it. Tom's voice on the recording. This bull didn't have a grazing plan. He had instinct. And his instinct produced better ecological outcomes than most management plans I've evaluated in 20 years. Craig paused the video, looked at the frozen frame. A satellite image of his property from above, greener than the properties around it. A rectangle of health surrounded by squares of degradation. His land, his failure, his bull. He thought about his father. About Art Kessler, who'd spent 30 years building something that worked. Who'd paid off the mortgage and raised 2 sons and died with his boots on. Art had run the land hard, the way everyone ran land in the 70s and 80s. More cows, more hay, more production. The economics demanded it, and the grass absorbed it until it couldn't. Craig had inherited the debt of his father's methods and the cost of his own. And when the weight of both crushed him, the one thing he left behind was the one thing that got it right. Craig closed the video, sat in the dark for a long time. He didn't cry. Men like Craig don't cry in apartments. They sit in the dark and hold it until the holding becomes the same as letting go. But this isn't where the story ends, because 3 months after the listing went up, someone bought the Kessler place. His name was Nathan Lowe, 31 years old. He'd been leasing pasture on 3 different properties across Burleigh County for 5 years, running 70 cows on ground he didn't own, and paying rent that ate most of his calf checks. He'd been saving for his own place the way young ranchers save. Slowly, painfully, one good calf crop at a time. The Kessler listing was priced below market because nobody wanted a failed operation with a derelict house and a bull nobody asked for. Nathan saw opportunity where the market saw liability. He drove out with his wife Megan on a Saturday, walked the property, looked at the barn, looked at the house, looked at the pasture, and looked at the bull. The bull was standing in the south pasture near the creek, still cautious around humans after 4 months alone. But not feral, not aggressive. He watched Nathan from 100 yards with the guarded attention of an animal that hadn't decided yet whether this new person was staying or leaving like the last one. Nathan looked at the grass under his boots. Thick, diverse, the kind of native stand that ranchers in the county spent thousands trying to reseed and rarely achieved. This grass is better than anything on the places I'm leasing, Nathan told Megan. I don't understand how. This place has been empty for months. Val told him about the bull, about Craig, about the 4 months, about Dr. Volk and the soil probes and the data that would end up at the conference in Boise. Nathan looked at the bull again. Different this time. Not as a problem left behind by the previous owner. As an asset nobody had recognized. He bought the property, kept the bull. The first thing Nathan did was call Dr. Russell Ware, the same vet network that served the county, and schedule a full workup on the bull. Breeding soundness exam, the one that Craig had never been able to afford from a quality program and that the auction had labeled marginal. The results surprised Russell. His scrotal has improved with maturity, 37 centimeters, well above threshold. Motility is strong, morphology is clean. Whatever was marginal at 4 years old isn't marginal at 6. This bull is sound. Nathan turned the bull out with 35 cows that spring, not 70. Not 108. 35 on 480 acres. Low density. The stocking rate that Tom Volk's data said the land could support sustainably. And the bull went to work. First breeding season. 32 of 35 cows settled. 91%. On an animal that nobody bid $800 for at the Bismarck sale. The calves came in March. Nathan was there for everyone. And by the 3rd calf, he started noticing something. They were uniform. Same frame, same bone, same muscling pattern. The kind of consistency that seed stock producers spend decades trying to breed into their programs. Every calf looked like it came from the same mold. Moderate frame, clean-fronted, deep-bodied, with the quiet temperament that makes handling easy and gains efficient. By weaning, Nathan's calves averaged 618 pounds, 30 to 50 pounds above the county average for fall-born calves on native grass. No creep feed, no supplements. Just the prairie that the bull had spent 4 months improving without anyone knowing it. The Bismarck sale that October. Nathan's calves sold as a group. A feedlot buyer from Mandan who'd been tracking the lots noticed the uniformity and asked Nathan one question after the sale. "What's the sire?" Nathan smiled. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you. The calves brought $920 a head, top 5% of the sale, on a bull that had been listed at $800 and received 0 bids 2 years earlier." Nathan ran the numbers that night. 32 calves at $920, $29,440, minus expenses, net profit in his first year on ground that Craig Kessler couldn't make work with 3 times the cattle. The difference wasn't the land. The land was the same 480 acres it had always been. The difference was the stocking rate, 35 cows instead of 108. The grass had room to recover. The soil had time to rebuild. The bull had space to graze the way his instinct told him to. And the calves grew on grass that was healthier than anything the county had seen in a generation, because one bull had spent 4 months teaching the land how to be land again. And one young rancher had been smart enough to listen. Nathan leased semen rights on the bull the following year to 2 neighboring operations. Both reported conception rates above 88%. Both reported calves that weaned heavier than their previous sire groups. Word spread the way it spreads in cattle country, not through advertising, through results. By the 3rd year, Nathan had ranchers calling from as far as Dickinson and Williston asking about the bull. The animal that nobody wanted at $800 was now generating $15,000 a year in semen fees alone, on top of the calves he was producing on Nathan's own cows. Nathan named him, something Craig had never done. He called him Kessler, after the family that left him behind, after the ground that raised him, after the name on the mailbox that was still there when Nathan bought the place because nobody had thought to take it down. Craig found out about the name from his cousin, the same cousin who'd sent him the conference video. Same subject line format. "You should know about this." Craig didn't call Nathan, didn't drive out to see the place, didn't ask for anything. But Diane told a friend later that she'd found Craig sitting at the kitchen table one morning with his coffee, looking at something on his phone, and smiling for the first time in 2 years. Kessler the bull is 8 now. He covers 35 cows on 480 acres of North Dakota prairie that gets greener every year. The grass has recovered to levels not seen since Art Kessler bought the place in '78. The soil organic matter is the highest in the county, 17 native species where the neighbors have 11. Nathan runs the operation the way the bull taught him, without knowing he was teaching. Low density, long rest. Let the grass recover. Let the animal move. Don't push more cattle onto ground than the ground can carry just because the bank says you need more revenue. The Kessler mailbox is still at the end of the driveway. Nathan never replaced it. Megan asked him once if he wanted to put up their own name. Nathan shook his head. "That name was here before me. The bull carries it now, and the grass remembers it. I'm not taking that down. A bull that nobody wanted, on land that nobody could make work, left behind by a family that ran out of options, and all he did was eat, and walk, and let the ground rest. The simplest version of the work, and the only one that lasted.